All right, folks, welcome to TSR Live, TSR Tonight, TSR After Dark. I have no idea what we're going to name this podcast yet, so if you have any suggestions, please let us know. My main man, John Maddox, is taking a little siesta. He's taking a break, doing the tropical getaways. If you need any travel ideas, tropical getaways, he's travel, specializes in cruise all inclusive resort vacations for couples, families, and groups. So if you want to start planning your next amazing vacation, visit tropicalgetaways.net, or you can call John at 901 667 8747. So tonight, what we're going to do is a little segment called Know Your Enemy. And so the first one up is going to be UTSA, and we have Stephen Whitaker from the rival site. Is it birdsup.com?
That's correct. Yeah.
All right, Stephen. This is your first time at the AAC Media Day. Just give me your thoughts on the overall experience from the Media Day.
I thought it was a very well put together media day. I did do a couple of Conference USA media days when UTSA was part of that conference. And I think the AAC is not just a step up in terms of competition, but the way they did their media day was also a little bit higher echelon than what we had experienced previously.
Yeah, and I think you were there with me when we spoke to Coach Trailer like off the record. He had some pretty
Mm-hmm.
cool things to say, but when you saw him and the players, how do you compare that from last year, media day? Were they more relaxed, more excited? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, funny, last year was one of the years I didn't get to Conference USA
Oh,
Media
okay.
Day. But I will say that they did handle it a little differently this year, in that last year they wore their championship rings and things of that sort. And then this year they kind of went without wearing them. And if I remember correctly, it was Rashad Wisdom. He said that it was partly because they felt, this being a new conference, they were just like the other teams. They were all trying to win their first championship in the American, and so they didn't feel it. They needed to bring rings from a previous conference, and they, uh, I also think they enjoyed their time up there too at American Media Days, and I think it was a good chance for them just to kind of see, and Frank Harris, he knew some of the other quarterbacks, so they were getting
Mm-hmm.
together during the media days, and he said that was good to get to see them away from a football field.
Yeah, I'm flashing up on the screen real quick for the ones that are watching us on YouTube, but for the ones that are listening, we're just going to rehash the AAC preseason media poll. We won't go through the whole thing, but when you take a look at the top four: Tulane, UTSA, SMU, and Memphis, those are the ones that got at least one first place vote. Were you surprised, or is that where you expected UTSA to land?
That was about where I thought they would go. I think you could have easily made a case for SMU to be second just by their what they've done in recent years. I think Memphis also has been strong in recent years. I think it helped UTSA being two-time Conference USA champions,
Mm-hmm.
and that in the last two, or I think it's the last two or last three seasons, they have the fourth most wins in all of FBS, and so I think that was the voters saw that, and I mean, some of it may have been against lesser competition, but then they played all five of the other teams coming with them to the American, and included in that the last 2 years were wins against Illinois and a non-conference at Memphis. So they not only were they winning their conference games, they were winning non-conference games against some tough opponents. And so I think that was kind of, and then having, if they didn't have Frank Harris this year, I don't think they'd be picked second in the American, but having that continuity at quarterback, I think certainly helped make the minds up for some of the media that chose him second.
And we'll dive right into UTSA. What are your expectations for the Roadrunners this year?
I think the highest, I would say, I think they're a team that could compete for the New Year's Six, and I think on the low end, if you go 8-4, that's a very respectable season. Depending, let's say, because at Houston, that's going to be tough. That's their first game in the Big 12, and then Tennessee's never an easy place to play, and then Texas State in non-conference is going to be much improved from previous years when UTSA played them. And so, if you go 2-2 in non-conference, and then you'd have to go, 8-0 in conference to not finish 8-4. And I think that game at Tulane could be tricky. And, Temple going to Philadelphia, that will be tough if there's weather, because UTSA historically hasn't fared well in cold and rainy conditions. So, I mean, you take and then some of the other games on their schedule, I think that 8-4 is about, I think, the low, but it wouldn't surprise me if, as wild and crazy as the past years have been, and the fact that Traylor in his 10 years only had, I think, like 9 games that weren't decided by one possession scores. So that you would think that they would trend some way. Eventually, their luck in single score games might come back to haunt them. And so, but I think 8-4 is probably the low, and then pushing for a New Year's Six would be the highest.
Yeah, definitely. And what do you think the strength and weaknesses are of the team?
I would say the strengths are going to be the health of Frank Harris, if he can stay healthy. And then they have JT Clark is going to be coming back from injury, and Cephas has had his legal issues, but it looks like that has all been adjudicated, and so he won't miss time. But if the offense, like if Harris gets hurt, or if Cephas and Clark don't pick up where they left off last year, I think the offense, that might be an issue. But that could be a strength that turns into a weakness, if depending on how it goes. I think the defense will be okay. They have enough guys coming back from last year and the year before that have experience, and I think the biggest challenge is going to be playing new team like East Carolina and Temple, and then in non-conference Tennessee. I think the biggest thing is going to be health, and that's like last year they had quite a bit of moving around on the offensive line because guys were getting hurt, and so you had guys out for a period, and so but that did, I think, will help this year because they have some depth at linemen that they know, if someone goes down, we have this guy that can step up. And I'll be interested to see, with their fall camp starts Wednesday, and so
Okay, it's the same with Memphis.
Yeah, so I'll be interested to see what they look like starting out on their fall camp.
Yeah, I think it helps, especially after that Tennessee game. If anyone's banged up, there's a bye week the very next week before you get into your conference game, so that'll be a plus for them.
Yeah,
or for you guys.
And in most years, the bye week has been like late October or early November, and so it's been like they had to slog for 8 weeks, and then there's a bye week, and then that was kind of the past couple of years they've used it to set up, like in I think 2020 was Traylor called it the November to remember, and that was where they were right on the cusp of the season, could go one way or the other, and they ended up going 3-0 that November. And they had their game at Rice canceled because of the pandemic issues. And but they went 3-0 and got to 7 wins, and got their first bowl was going to be the Frisco Bowl, but then that I think it was, I forget who they were playing in that one, but SMU in that one had to back out. So then they got put in the first responder bowl with Louisiana. But it was like by the bowl, they were so banged up because they had their bye week in October. And so they had to, fight pretty much to the end trying to win. So I think the early bye this year will be an interesting thing, and it will kind of help break up the non-conference from the conference schedule.
Yeah, which is nice. Now, the jump to the American Conference, how have you seen that help in UTSA's recruiting?
Well, I would say it's been a positive. They've been able to get some guys that they might not otherwise have. And I think you'll see it. They've gotten some early commits for the 24 class, and I don't have them at hand right now,
Yeah.
but they do have some guys that I think probably wouldn't commit this early if they didn't all know that this was the conference they would be playing in. And I think if they have a good season this year, that could inevitably help with recruiting down the line. Because if you're a high school, like let's say you're a high school kid in Texas, and right now we have 13 FBS schools, because Sam Houston just moved up joining Conference USA, but you have 13 FBS schools to choose from. And if, let's say, UTSA goes 10-2 in its first year in the American after back-to-back Conference USA champions, that's going to look pretty good to a kid, in East Texas or the Panhandle that's wanting to maybe play big-time college football, but doesn't get on the radar of like a Tech or an A&M or UT Austin. So.
Yep. And two more questions I have for you, then I'll let you go. Right. Who do you think, well, if you can pick one player on the Roadrunners, who do you think is going to have a breakout season that no one's talking about?
I would say with Zachary Franklin transferring out, that opens up a spot for a receiver other than Cephas and Clark. As to who that would be, I mean, you could see Ogle Kellogg as a possibility. He's he's a senior that has gotten extra eligibility from the COVID year, and he was pretty highly touted when he first got here, but then he kind of got overshadowed. But I think he's one that could break out. Another one is Dan Dishman. He's the other tight end with Oscar Cardenas, and I think he could be in for a good year, especially if they do have issues with the receivers and have to go with more throwing to tight ends. And then Dishman also is a good run blocker, so that could help spring Kavorian Barnes. So I think those are two that could be in for a good year.
All right, and last question. If I had to put your feet to the fire here, what is your season-long prediction for UTSA? Will they win the league?
I think they will be in it till the end, and it will come down to that last week against Tulane. And depending on how SMU and Memphis do, that UTSA Tulane game will either be who gets to host the conference championship game or who gets the right to play SMU or Memphis in the conference championship game.
So pre-fall camp, let's just put it on, because I went on the record and said pre-fall camp predictions. I have UTSA and Memphis playing for the championship. So that's my pre-fall camp. So that's why I always preface that pre-fall camp, because after fall camp, someone gets hurt, transfers, whatever. So so if UTSA is going to be in the championship, who do you think they're going to play?
I would say probably either Memphis or SMU. And if I had to go for it, I'll go with being on a Memphis post. I'll say Memphis.
Good deal, man. Tell folks where they can find you on social media.
All right. Y'all can find me on UTSA Rivals, at UTSA Rivals. And then my personal handle is at Stephen Whit 89.
All right, man. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, folks, that was Stephen Whitaker with birdsup.com, the Rivals affiliate. It was great talking to him. So visit our message boards at tigersportsreport.com. Tell me what you think. Is our predictions correct? Is it wrong? Just let me know. Until next time, appreciate it. Go Tigers, go.